Good morning. Welcome to this Saturday's workshop, another Saturday's workshop in August. As we get to the close of August, it's almost the end of August, how the year runs. I think that our obsession and challenges with dealing with COVID-19 has made this year such a short year, and it's almost running past halfway towards the end. I'm going to begin as we do. Normally, my name is Charles Sine. I'm the CEO of Anti-Fragility Health. And the series of workshops that you can find on our YouTube channel, Anti-Fragility Health, and on our Facebook page, this series of workshops focuses on what we call longevity. It's a series of workshops on longevity. And what is longevity? Longevity is living a long and healthy life, and it composes of two components. And the way we attack them, it's that you have to attack both. They are not the same thing. A lot of people think that if you're healthy, you're going to live long. No, health span is different from lifespan. And we actually want to make sure we understand that. Because for most of us, genetically, our cells, the length of life our cells are going to live is predetermined. And so in most cases, when it comes to lifespan, we want to slow down the aging process. And that's what really gives you increased lifespan. It's really important that we understand that. So being healthy doesn't mean you're going to live a long life. So there are other strategies on how you slow down the clock that is running and the aging clock, because aging is also a chronic illness. So let's focus on the things that drive longevity. We look at three big things. Number one is your mindset, right? You want to live a long and healthy life, you need to have the mindset that's required for that. And that is a positive mindset that is ready to take the challenges of a long life, and that you have money and all the other things that I call the attributes of freedom that would allow you to enjoy a long and healthy life. The second part is lifestyle. And lifestyle is really important because the impact of our life, or the way we live our lives, actually impact our genetic architecture in this overall concept called epigenetics. The epigenetic impact is how our lifestyle choices change the genetic expression. And that genetic expression that's changed is called epigenetics. And so, for example, if you inherited a really good architecture for your lung cardiovascular, but you end up smoking, you actually will dysfunction the cardiometabolic expression into heart disease and other consequences that come with that. That may not have been part of your genes. But on the other hand, if you inherited a bad cardiometabolic architecture from your parents because they smoked, because we inherit that epigenetic architecture, then if you live a good lifestyle, you could actually change that architecture again. That's the opportunity that lifestyle gives us. So it's really important that we understand this, right? And we've gone over this again and again. So the lifestyle choices you make based on your mindset actually changes your genetic expression, which is what we call epigenetics. And lastly, the body, or the way God created the architecture, is that it has signals. Signals of temperature, signals of pressure, blood pressure, signals of pain, dysfunction, signals of headache, signals of drowsiness. So we get a lot of signals. And among these signals, we have the ability to discern whether we're healthy or whether we're sick, and therefore we drive the intervention. So signals and our understanding of them is really, really important. So for example, if you cannot sleep 8 hours every night, that tells you something is wrong, because you are supposed to sleep 8 hours a night if you are already in your 40s. Yes, babies can sleep 14, 15 hours because that's babies, they're growing. But if you're above 25, 30, and you cannot sleep up to 8 hours, or you're sleeping more than 8 hours, like 10, 12 hours, then something is wrong, right? So Those are signals that we can then look into and see what the underlying drivers of that are, as an example. But today, we're stepping into this big arena. This is the number one cause of death in America globally, cardiometabolic failures. The failure of the driving architecture that drives blood, that drives nutrients, that drives liquid. It's like the pipeline. I would call it the pipeline, the thing that runs the body, that supplies fuel. So this is our logistics architecture, the thing that carries the food when it's digested and carries it to all the cells and bring back all the outcomes from cellular function, what we call all the outputs. And those outputs will be in different formats. So this plumbing architecture, when it's dysfunctional, it's the number one cause of death before cancer. So it's important we understand that. And so we're stepping into this space, and it's going to cover 4 weeks of discussion. Today, we're going to talk about the big one that everybody tends to be ignorant about, which is the HDL, LDL cholesterol architecture. And next week, we'll talk about the sugar metabolism, the issues of diabetes that's killing so many people with amputations, going blind, and dialysis. Actually, you notice they keep building more dialysis centers than telling us to stop eating sugar, right? I love capitalism. Make money from stupid and ignorant and lazy people. That's the architecture. So if you don't stop eating sugar, you end up losing your kidney in a dialysis center, or get amputated, or go blind, and that's the outcome. There is no other choice than to stop eating sugar. And that's what we're going to talk about next week in sugar metabolism. And then we want to look at the genetics and epigenetics impact as we look at some of the measurements, things like LP little a, and some of the biomarkers that are inherited, and what are the strategies you need to do to change those, because that's what we inherited, and you just want to make sure it doesn't express in this current life. And then finally, we'll look at the thing that drives all chronic illness, inflammation and oxidative stress. We're going to talk about inflammation today and oxidative stress. And just very briefly, let me give you some context around that. At the core of all chronic illness is inflammation and chronic illness. And where does most inflammation come from? It comes from obesity. It comes from infections. It comes from heavy metals. All of those things that in functional medicine, we want to remove so that we can lower the opportunity for inflammation when it's out of control, when it becomes chronic, to cause chronic illness. And so we want to reduce chronic inflammation, because acute inflammation is good, but chronic is very bad. And then we go into that big word called oxidative stress, which is really very simple, that we need to clean the debris out of the cell as it generates energy. When the mitochondria produces energy, there are waste products. And that waste products are very, very challenging free radicals that destroy the architecture of the cell itself. And that's why we use a lot of antioxidants, right? Because they remove the oxidants. They call antioxidants for a reason. The anti-over oxidation, so they're removing the excess oxidative stress. They call them antioxidants, right? Like glutathione, vitamin C. A lot of our architecture of nutrients has antioxidant capacity, because if not, the mitochondria and the cell dies out of the frustration of being overwhelmed by the byproducts of generating energy. So it's really important that we understand that. And that's why one of the big signals of chronic illness is tiredness, that you have fatigue. And you're always tired. You wake, even after you sleep, you wake up, you're still tired, because of the impacts of oxidative stress and the lack of your cells to clear up the debris of these radicals, free radicals. We call them free radicals, right? They are nitrogen free radicals or CH3 free radicals, and they cause a lot of havoc. And so that's something that's important. So we're going to look at that in the 4th week. So let's start our journey into this space of HDL and LDL cholesterol. So what is HDL and LDL? So these are lipoproteins. There are lipoproteins. There's one high density lipoprotein and low density lipoprotein. So they are lipoproteins, and they are like trucks, and they carry cholesterol. That is their job. These are trucks. They bind, they form these complex structures where fat molecules sit on so they can be carried to the cells. And where do they start? The engine is at the liver. The liver is where all the fat that's absorbed from food comes. It's called the effluent engine for fat. And from there, it is loaded onto HDL trucks. These HDL trucks carry the fat in the bloodstream. And when they get to the cell, they transfer their load onto the smaller ones called LDLs. And therefore, when we measure in your bloodstream, we want to see low LDL, but a measurable amount of HDL. And the ratio should be almost a 2-to-1 ratio. So we want to see more HDL than LDL in the bloodstream, because that's where we can find them. We cannot go into the tissue where the LDL is carrying the fat. And you ask me, why is the LDL carrying the fat to the cell? To make energy. That's where the energy originally comes from. It is the preferred choice at the cellular level to make energy from fat rather than from sugar. But if we keep giving sugar, that becomes the choice. And when it's excess, it converts it to fat. And that's how we grow fat. That's where obesity comes from. So any dysfunction in this engine, right, it's a very precise process. If you look at the construction site, the big trucks are bringing all the gravel and everything. They offload, and then the smaller trucks take it to where it's needed. So it's a very challenging process, and sometimes there are traffic jams. And so what could cause a traffic jam? Right? What could cause a traffic jam? A traffic jam could be caused by blockage. Right? The road is blocked. Or there's just too much traffic. Right? Or there's a bridge that's collapsed. So there are lots of things that can go on with the HDL, LDL. But let's explore some of the things that we measure when we look at HDL. So most times we're looking at the number of particles. It's really important that you have a lot of particles carrying fat. But the underlying theory, we used to think that even if it was extremely high, that was okay. But we find out that there's actually a range that is acceptable. If not, there is increased cardiovascular risk. So having low HDL is not a good thing. But having HDL that's too high is also not a good thing. So there is a particular range. It's like sugar. Having low sugar is not good. Having high sugar, it's not good. You know, God is really a very interesting guy. He loves balance. So we need to stay within the upper lower levels and the lower limits within that sweet spot. And that is the critical issue about HDL measurement that we need to understand. So a lot of people say cholesterol is bad. Don't forget, when we're measuring cholesterol is a good thing because we need fat. And the fats, look at the brain, it's all fat. Cholesterol is a good thing. The only problem is when there's too much cholesterol in the bloodstream. And that is because there is an HDL, LDL dysfunction in terms of the logistics, in terms of who is carrying the fat to the bloodstream, into the bloodstream to the cells, and who is bringing the excess fat that the cells couldn't use back to the liver. And what happens as it comes back to the liver and the liver is overwhelmed with too much cholesterol, then it begins to build belly fat around the liver, right? That's where it stores it. That's why we all develop belly fat as we start getting fatter and fatter and fatter and fatter and become fat boys like me, right? So it's very, very important that you manage that overall balance really well. It's an important thing. So the second thing that we look at are the sizes of the HDL particle. We want bigger trucks because bigger trucks mean they carry more cholesterol or fat, right? Triglycerides. And so carrying the size of these particles is very important. And when most people go to their doctors and say, oh, I did my labs and my doctor said I was fine. Well, so what's your cholesterol number? Well, they said it was fine. What's your HDL number? Well, he said it was fine. Well, one of the challenges that we have when we look at labs is that we are looking at the labs, the numbers that are represented are population ranges. We need to find our specific numbers or for our family that is the right number for us. So there's a difference between the individual statistic and there's the population statistic. So when your doctor says you're fine, most times he's wrong because he's referencing your numbers against the population rather than for that specific individual. For example, we know that African Americans or black people have different ranges. We know that Asians have different ranges. We know that Hispanics have different ranges. We know that white people have different ranges. And we know that men and women have different ranges. But the labs all use one range. So the question is, what is fine? That should be a challenge for you. You need to challenge those numbers and really come to a deep understanding that I'm a black man. What are the boundaries for my HDL, LDL cholesterol numbers so I don't die? And that's why most black people die from heart disease because they're misled by those population numbers. Lastly, we want to look at the integrity of the particles, right? Because if you have old trucks, then they slow down in traffic and they produce a lot of smoke, right? So we want healthy, powerful lipoproteins that are carrying the fat. Really important you understand this. And these are the things that's why I prefer using Boston Heart Diagnostics as my blood for diagnosing cardiometabolic issues because it gives me in-depth detail around the particle sizes for me to be able to estimate how much risk a patient is carrying. As I said, I was just going to stay within the HDL LDL topic because in itself, it's a very big topic and I want to make sure that we get it and don't get confused by the other things. So tomorrow or the next week when I begin to look at the other things, especially when we get to epigenetics, we'll begin to look at your LP little a levels, homocysteine. We'll begin to look at all those genetic markers that we worry about that are actually things that we inherited and what actions we take around those. So let's now look at HDL dysfunction. 3 big things drive HDL dysfunction. 3 big things. Inflammation. Inflammation is, we all have inflammation, chronic inflammation. It just being alive generates significant chronic inflammation. And as I said, that's why we have patients downstairs who are on IV now with chelation, and they are removing heavy metals and other condensates that are blocking the arterial wall. And therefore, removing those heavy metals reduces your inflammatory signals. And so it's a very, very important thing that we need to do. Oxidative stress. That's why we give a lot of glutathione. Or that's why we are supposed to take a lot of glutathione. And if I look here, I will be able to look at a couple of supplements that we use for these things. So we have here the CM Core, a complete metabolic protocol in convenient packs. This is from orthomolecular, and it looks at those things that I've just been talking about. It's a 3 well-researched formulas for cardiovascular and metabolic health, blood sugar balance. Remember, we're going to talk about that next week. Inflammatory balance, and then cholesterol support. So very interesting supplements that address. There are lots of supplements we have here. We have this one from Metagenics, and it's a very important one. It's targeted support for HDL function. Very, very important in creating the right balance. One of the other ones that I take is the Lipitor OX, very important supplement in balancing that HDL, LDL balance in the body. The other one I also take that everybody should be taking is the niacin. You either get the fast release or the time release. It's really important you take niacin every day because it allows the body really to manage the overall cholesterol and fat metabolism. And so there are lots of different things here. We're going to talk about nitric oxide for vasodilation and circulation, very critical. I take the Citrinox. This is too sweet for me. It's lozenges. It dissolves very quickly in your mouth. But I take the Citrinox. They are both nitric oxide supplements. And something else that we're going to talk about later, it's about Aterosil and Broco-Protect. We need to protect the liver itself so that the liver is working, because the liver is the conductor of fat metabolism. It's really important. It drives the triglycerides, the cholesterol, the HDL, the LDL transport. And you know the liver does a lot of other things. But when it comes to cardiometabolic, we want to focus on the liver functions for that, like bile and all of that. But we just want to stay with the fat as the fat conductor in the body. Very important. The Broco-Protect and the Aterosil, which is for endothelial function. And we'll talk about that as we walk ahead. So we spoke about inflammation. Let me go back. What are the key ones that are used for inflammation? SPM. There are significant studies already about SPM as a modulator of inflammation. Let me quickly explain what modulating of inflammation means. So this is what happens. There's a trigger for inflammation. The inflammation rises and it's supposed to come down. This is acute inflammation. Chronic inflammation, it's when it comes up and it's not modulated. And SPM modulates inflammation. So if you take SPM every day, as I do, it's one of our most expensive supplements because it addresses this big issue, inflammation. It's a fractionated fish oil, very expensive supplement. This little body with 60 soft gels, it's $70. So it's more than $1 for each of these fish soft gels that are in here. It's a very expensive supplement because it addresses that issue. And there are over hundreds of studies about how SPM modulates inflammation. It's a very, very important topic. And actually everybody should be on this. You have no other choice because inflammation comes from infection. It comes from obesity, from the fat that we're storing, because fat causes inflammation. It comes from allergies. It comes from all the funny infections that are going on in our body as the body responds to the fight from bacteria and viruses, especially now with COVID around. But on top of that, it's important that there's enough fish oil in the body to also support the architecture in supporting inflammation. So the right kind of fish oil. Because one of the challenges in American cooking and restaurants is that we have much more omega-6 than omega-3. And so you want to take a lot of good fish oil or eat free catch salmon and all the fishes that are wildly caught that have very, very good. Don't listen to the people who tell you it was wildly caught. You need to have evidence that it was wildly caught. So you get it. Or you take my omega-3s. which are validated to be actual extracted from those fishes. And therefore, the balance of omega-3 and omega-6 is really critical in addressing the inflammatory signals. So that was number one, inflammation. Number two, let's talk about oxidative stress. Oxidative stress, big topic. And that's why we use glutathione. Oxidative stress arises, as I said earlier, from the production of energy. It is like a car running in a closed garage. That's what cells are. They're bounded all around. And therefore, somebody needs to remove the exhaust gases, which are this nitric oxide and just free radicals that are running crazy and destroying everything around them. And so what antioxidants do, they bind with these free radicals and excrete them, allowing the oxygen flow that is required for diphosphate to be transformed into triphosphate, ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is the architecture of energy. That extra phosphate molecule is the source of energy in the entire body. And whenever we expend energy, that one phosphate is taken and used, and it's translated back to adenosine diphosphate, and then it uses more oxygen and more phosphate carriers, electron transfer carriers, to then go back to produce triphosphate, which again the energy. So imagine that every cell has about, like the heart muscles, have more than 1 million mitochondria per cell. Therefore, at the cellular level, when we don't have enough antioxidants to pull out the excesses or the exhaust fumes from energy production, then the cell is overwhelmed by its exhaust and it suffers from oxidative stress. Therefore, antioxidants are critical, and I don't think I brought any up here today. Let me see what I did. Well, NAC is here. NAC is a precursor for glutathione, and this is something that I take every day. They say one capsule, but I take more. NAC, that's N-acetyl-L-cysteine. It's a glutathione precursor, and glutathione is sold in many different forms. We recommend you take the precursor because glutathione is a very unstable molecule. And so if you feed the upper biochemical chain with NAC, then more glutathione is produced at the point required to allow the cell to bind and excrete the exhaust materials from energy production. Therefore, the cells continues to produce good energy, and then there's no fatigue. It's a very, very important idea you need to understand. But why is this connected to chronic illness? Because cells that don't have energy cannot fight, cannot perform. That's really at the core. That's why if you are fatigued, if you have oxidative stress, COVID will get you, because the immune cells are not functioning at high capacity. So if you address inflammation and oxidative stress, your T cells will be ready for the fight. And they will go and fight to the death, because that's what is required of them. Therefore, giving them the underlying nutrients ensures that they are ready and they will fight a good fight. It's really important. The last area is high blood sugar. And that's why I take these two things every day. Berberine is a substitute, and actually a better performing substitute than metformin. And as you know, metformin is an anti-aging solution. So is berberine. And what do? They facilitate the pancreas in terms of insulin production to remove sugar from the bloodstream. Sugar in the bloodstream causes stress and causes inflammation signals. Dioxanol is really a combination of alpha lipoic acid to really support that sugar metabolism. I forgot to show you, yes, there's lipoic acid here. I love lipoic acid. CoQ10, for people who were wondering why I was not showing CoQ10, it's a very, very important supplement, as we know, as an antioxidant for supporting oxidative stress issues. I'm going over time today because this is a very fascinating topic for me, and I love it, as you can tell. There's still more to go. I have glucose control here. It's chocolate flavor. And it is for the nutritional management of our glucose response. Glucose response, it's critical. So let's quickly go through our interventions as I run out of time. So I spoke about endothelial integrity, which is the structure of the heart, and that's what I take Aterosil, professional strength. You can only get it through us. It's powerful. It strengthens the arterial wall's protective barrier. That's what we call the endothelium. It promotes a healthy heart, maintains healthy arterial walls, and support a strong and vital glycocalyx. Very, very important supplement that we take every day for heart. And then there's the HDL composition. I spoke about omega-3 and omega-6. Then there's the cholesterol load. That's why we need to make sure we only eat good fats and support the liver with the Broco-Protect, which is to support the detoxification architecture, and then the liver integrity issues. So I know I ran out of time. It's just a topic that I love and I'm deeply fascinated with. Please do send off your questions, your comments. It's a challenging topic, but if you outsource it to your doctor, you do so at your own risk. Your doctor is not your slave. You are the owner of your heart and your cardiometabolic architecture. Therefore, your deep understanding and comprehension of it is mandatory if you want to live a long and healthy life. Thank you for joining us for another workshop today. Mike, thank you for filming with pleasure. And for all of those of you who are watching and not paying attention all the time, we'll get you. Take care. Love you. Bye-bye.